Paleontology is dusty sometimes. You can cut it now.
You got cut off.
Welcome to the lab. That was too much. Hey!
So goofy.
Okay.
You know, of all the tyrannosaur skulls, duckbill mummies, giant limb bones we have at Badlands Dinosaur Museum, they're not what stresses me out the most. They're not what challenges me. It's these tiny little things. It's this tiny mammal jaw, little raptor brain cases, pterosaur bones, stuff that you need high magnification, specialized tools, and just a little bit of knowledge to work with. So I thought I'd make a video showing how I do this, why I do this, why not make it in 4K too. We're going to be working on a Judithian mammal jaw, so that's Campanian, about 76 million years old, locked up in the late Cretaceous. We don't find many of these out in the Judith River Formation / Dinosaur Park Formation, where we do most of our field work. So it's a special little jaw that has dozens, if not hundreds, of little microfractures running through it. It's only a couple centimeters long, if not a little shorter, and a bit frustrating. Here you're seeing just a pointer, just a very pointy needle, so I can pick out grain by grain by grain very, very delicately. And so I need both hands to do this. I have an air supply that blasts the excess particles away, so I don't have to use my hand, a brush, or a poofer to do that. This was collected in a block of sandstone matrix from our mummified Lambeosaurus site. This is the first Lambeosaurus from the US, and everything we collect alongside is very cool, very valuable. This was collected in two pieces. The anterior portion of the jaw was left in a matrix block, and then the back of the jaw holding the coronoid process was collected in a baggie. So part of this operation will be joining those two. In geolingo, this is locked in a very poorly sorted lithic arenite. Fancy way of saying a sandstone that's medium to coarse, has a lot of different mineral grains in it, presenting some tricky things in terms of preparing alveoli, tooth sockets, getting little bits of mud that bind the grains off of the tooth roots. So we're going to be using a number of tools to do that. The steel paddles holding those droplets are Bergeon watch oilers. They have really slender scoops on the end that vibe really well with the surface tension of the consolidant. By consolidant, I mean an agent that's going to bind cracks together and go deep into that fossil bone and make sure cracks that I can't see are also bound. There are many different consolidants used in fossil prep. In this case, I'm using not paraloid. Paraloid's the most common. I use that in the dinosaur lab for larger fossils and things. This is B76, or polyvinyl butyriol, also known as Butvar, small clear plastic bead dissolved in 190 proof ethanol. The advantage of ethanol is that it penetrates just as deep as acetone, but when it evaporates away, it has a lower vapor pressure, so it doesn't happen quite as fast. You don't have a lot of bubbles form, and overall, it's not pushed out from the center of the specimen, so in the long run, it's stronger. It also has a matte finish and can be removed from the surface of the fossil, so you'll see that there's a little bit of excess that gets out on the surface. That's easily removed with really light air abrasion,
and some other techniques such as just applying solvent. I'm using a very fine air scribe at about 40 magnification, give or take 10 here and there, to get rid of the overburden, like the bulk matrix of material that's surrounding the specimen, so I can hone in closer on those really, really fine details. This isn't your average air scribe. It's meant for high power microscope work. In this case, we're looking at a Hardy Winkler that's HW-322. These are tools produced by one man in Germany. Just one man makes them, and they're legendary in the paleo prep community. Just not very abundant. So we're going to have to watch things like the ZOIC Balaur, which seems to be a really nice contender with the HW-322. But, you know, other than these two units, there's not a finer air scribe you can get. Most of the others have tips that aren't locked in place, so they rotate and rotate and rotate and rotate. And there's no way to effectively carve a tip like that, or use it at these magnifications without a risk of error and scratching. You could hardly see the tip of that vibrate compared to some of the air scribes you'll see later on, like the Velociraptor that's used for really strong bulk matrix removal.
Just so happens that this jaw has a really tough, indurated claystone pebble. That's probably what you call an altered lithic. So it was tumbled pebble, feldspar or something like that, that's since been converted to clay over the 76 million years it's been in the ground. The sand adjacent to the jaw is really nice to work with. A bit gritty, but we can deal with it. And again, you'll see this oil applicator periodically introduce B76 into these cracks. Every time I see it, I add more. Just goes deeper and deeper and deeper with that ethanol, strengthening the bone, making sure those teeth don't fall out of the sockets, at least as best as we possibly can. When I want to add a greater volume of consolidant, I use these oil applicator bottles with syringe tips. So you see a drop of B76 go on there. Don't do that most of the time, but sometimes it is called for. The specimen was collected in two pieces. You just saw there, it was broken cleanly, mostly cleanly in the quarry, and we didn't put it back together in the quarry. You should never do that. It's just going to cause things to powder up. You're going to have more problems and more damage to the specimen. So later on you'll see me attach that. And here again, I'm going grain by grain to expose the occlusal surfaces of those teeth. It's nice to have little individual grains to push away. This is with that slender tungsten carbide pin vise. This is just a few microns across. At its tip, thinner than a human hair. I have to be very careful with the pressure that I apply and which direction I'm applying the pressure. I don't want that little cusp hanging out to fall off, at least not blow away to where I can't find it again. That's going to need to be reattached to the root that's in the posterior portion of the jaw that I still have bagged up. Pressure is very important. In addition to manual dexterity, but most of all, you have to be in the game. I've seen people with very shaky hands do this quite easily. You just have to mentally be there. I often breathe in, and then as I breathe out, I do the pin vise operation. Then I pull back, I breathe in, then breathe out slowly. That helps stabilize you. Some of the matrix, some of the bound sand grains are acting like rubber here and there. So that's consolidative, that's still drying, still curing, so it wants to be a little elastic. This is a consequence of consolidating a specimen. I won't say over-consolidating, because this is what it needs. I'd rather pull away at grains bound by consolidant that's still drying than wait for it to dry, because that's more of a pain, and you're going to see that later in this video. Because I'm really close to introducing the posterior end of the jaw with the coronoid process, I'm really lathering up that broken margin there with consolidant. In this case, still using B76, but I'm going to use B72, paraloid B72 at that junction. Now moving toward the anterior end of the jaw, let's figure out what's going on there. Now, I talk about magnification a lot in my other videos, very important for things like fossil fish and microfossils like this one. I'm about 40x magnification on a MZ5, a Swiss stereo microscope. Can do about 50 magnification, and thought I'd do a little demonstration showing you the basic operation of the scope. It's not that unintuitive, I'd say, but sort of place yourselves in my shoes, in my eyes.
From 6x all the way to 50.
Or I could be big smart and just you film it there while I do it here. From 6x all the way to 50. Okay. That about does what I...
Working on that anterior-most exposed tooth on the mandible. Some of you might be wondering, where do those grains go? Are they just pinging away? Are they building up underneath the fossil in that trench? I have a lock line hose attached to my compressed air line and a foot pedal. It allows me to use both hands to balance the pin vise while also lightly blasting the air away. You want to have that regulated separately from all of your other tools and things. I only use 25 psi max on that. The roots of this tooth in particular are full of dozens of microfractures. So I've decided to just douse it in B76 here. B76 is quite reversible. A bit more of a pain than just pinging off grains, but I don't want to lose that tooth. I'm also using a polyester swab there to disperse the remnants of the B76 onto the surface. That can be removed later using air abrasive techniques. And again, I'm going to use this technique in other places too. Sometimes dousing is better. Now I wouldn't do this willy-nilly with like B72, paraloid B72 and acetone. That's thicker and it doesn't penetrate as well. You may have noticed the tall walls of sediment to the left here in particular that are out of focus. Now I need to get these out of the way to do the rest of the work. It can be done initially. I was not going to do that here. The specimen was not very consolidated and needed some work so I could figure out where it stopped and where it ended. I didn't know if there would be another mandible attached to the other side. Usually they break apart. That mandibular symphysis doesn't have much cartilage. It's not fused with bone, but got to err on the side of caution. So right now I'm going to use an air scribe to take down some of that bulk, try to get into that pebble conglomerate layer, the altered lithics, and also take down that wall that's sort of getting in the way of those low angles I need to use the hand tools. Here I've been using the ZOIC Velociraptor Mark II. This isn't something I do detail work of fossils with, so I don't approach the bone and ping matrix off of bone, but it is a workhorse for doing this kind of work, and it's fine enough to where I'm comfortable getting fairly close to that jaw. Not too close, but fairly close. ZOIC also makes the Microraptor. It's a smaller air scribe of the same push plate build. Both of them are a little stronger and sturdier than the Paleotools push plate line. These aren't tools that I use for detail work most of the time, but they are great for pushing matrix. The Microraptor doesn't really work well with our altered lithics, so Velociraptor is a go-to here. For a push plate air scribe, it is quite sturdy, it is well designed. Now I've loosened up that problematic lithic. Moved a little more than I thought it would, but this is what needed to happen. There is a sort of elegance to this air scribe. You use them enough, you can predict where things are going to ping, how things are going to pry. This sandy matrix in particular is pretty forgiving until it gets to those clay cobbles. For the longest time I thought they were just initially clay, but they're so rounded it makes more sense for them to be converted feldspathic pebbles. Now in comes one of the finest scribes of them all, the German HW-322. This is something that I will ping grains off of fossils with. I can even prepare fossil fish, fossil scales. The tip of this thing is locked in place. It's not of a push plate design, it's of a hybrid piston design. There are many different lengths of tips available, but the end of that is tungsten carbide, many times thinner than the end of a hypodermic needle. You can see how close I'm getting. It's quite an elegant tool. At some point I want to compare it with the ZOIC Balaur. We have one in the lab here that I didn't use for this project, but I do want to put them side by side and compare what they can do. ZOIC's also locked that tip in place, so they're of a similar design. Now I'm going to rotate the specimen. One thing I emphasize to volunteers in particular is to take a look at every angle you can. Use sandbags to prop up the specimen. Look into the alveoli, into the holes where the roots of the teeth go. Look at it from the front, look at it from the back. Try all sorts of crazy angles. I'm not really doing that here, but while you're watching it happen on camera, I thought I'd bring it up. And with this orientation, I'm able to get into those alveoli a little bit. I don't intend to remove all of the grains from them. It's over preparation. It's unnecessary, unless a researcher comes along who really, really needs to see it. But my instinct is to leave a little bit of sediment there. Where the bone meets the cusp of the tooth, it gets so paper thin, wants to blow into powder and go into the air. So our job as preparators is to mediate the volume of rock we leave behind and the volume of fossil we leave behind, and also the volume that's blown into the air into our dust extractors. And there's the anterior end of that jaw there. I've exposed it a little more. I just have this feeling, look how slender that bone gets as it grasps the non-existent cusps of teeth that fell off the jaw millions of years ago. But I want to douse it in more consolidant, and of course let that dry for at least a few minutes, if not more, before I go back to it. Sometimes I get a little crazy and take advantage of the loosened sediment temporarily. So I've let it dry a bit. There's going to be a cut here that you can't see. Want to be as careful as possible. If you haven't seen or guessed already, this specimen is going to end up on a small pedestal of matrix. So each time I break out that Velociraptor, I'm working toward that goal, to planing down the sediment evenly and then not undercutting the specimen, leaving a couple centimeters of wiggle room, but that will help me manipulate it a bit more when I do finer preparation. And now for the fun part. Being inside of a dust extractor gives me the capability of using air abrasive techniques. I'm going to need them to strip some of that B76 off of the jaw, to get down into some of the alveoli at least a little bit, and to expose some of the finest details on the fossil before adding that coronoid process, before adding the back portion of the jaw that was removed in the quarry. This is a 35 millimeter tip on a SwamBlaster pen. I use the model MV-2L. This is at roughly 10 psi in pressure with a powder flow level between 1 and 2. There's no metric scale to attach to that. SwamBlaster has their own scale for abrasive powders. If you're in the know, you're in the know. Just for anybody who has a SwamBlaster or a similar unit, like a Comco unit, that's your specs. I'm using sodium bicarbonate as a blasting medium. There are many other things you can do. You can use iron powder. I find aluminum oxide a little too abrasive. Some people use fumed silica. I don't want that near me. Baking powder is a good all-rounder. It can be difficult if you're using grain sizes under 50 micron. You really have to keep that really, really, really dry. I'm using a powder sifted mostly above 50 micron, 80 to 100. It works pretty well in the unit. You have to use a slightly wider nozzle or it clogs pretty frequently. Still experimenting with different media and things, but you can just see how elegantly it gets those finer grains off of that jaw. I most often use it as a finishing technique, but sometimes, depending on the fossil, especially in the case of fish, I might use it all the time. And I'm cleaning all of the excess sediment from that broken joint. Excess sediment and consolidant, or else the fit is not going to be true with the back of the jaw. You have to think in advance as a preparator. You have to sort of live in the past and the present. I hope that doesn't sound too preachy, but I guess this is my opportunity to be preachy. It's about time to introduce the back of the jaw. Put it off for a while, but now that I have the pedestal going, most of the forward jaw fully prepared, we have to get everything together. I use several fine-tipped pin vices, both with hook tips and straight tips, to position it just into place. And once it's butted up right against that soft end of the anterior, so that end is soft because it's recently consolidated, then I hit it with a strong consolidant. So this was Paraloid B72. It's going to dry quicker, it's going to be a little thicker, and because the fit isn't super clean, it's going to bridge those gaps. The key is to just let it sit for a little bit. Don't play with it too much, don't push it too much. If the fit isn't going the way you want it to, you can step back, let it dry, deconsolidate, come back with hands that are less shaky, and a frame of mind that's better for the job. I often do it. I get frustrated. Don't keep working. Step back, even if it's for 15 minutes. This all seems like one smooth operation, but there are a number of cuts in here that are between 15 and 25 minutes, and this is no exception. One example is that during this operation we had the crown of one of the middle teeth, one of the teeth close to that break, fall off of all those dozens of microfractures, probably due to the consolidant. The key is not to panic, not to blow it away with your air supply, or with your fuming rage, if you're a rageful person. I'm not really a rageful person, but I also don't want to lose the tip of that tooth. It's not a disaster. These fractures have existed long before we were born. Hundreds of thousands, millions of years ago. But our job is to put that crown back where it belongs. And then throw some of that 12% B76 solution on there. Let it dry, and that will hold everything together on a fossil as small as this. Disaster averted. And when it's about 10 minutes dry, I'm going to go in with light air abrasives to strip the B76 off the surface of the fossil. This will make sure it comes off clean, while also not blowing anything away. You have to direct your airflow about 45 degrees above the specimen, never below, especially something small like this. But look how that layer of B76 just comes off with such finesse. It's much, much easier than any viscosity of B72. That said, I still use B72 for the most part on really big fossils, but Mike Eklund made me a believer when I saw him in his own facility last year. I really give him credit for raising the bar on my ability to do microprep. good view of this coronoid process coming up here. Of course, you could use a technique with acetone to strip this consolidant rather than rely on air abrasives. However, that could be disastrous for this fossil. There are so many microfractures, and acetone settling into the fossil, it could fall apart under its own weight. You had 3 times the amount of liquid weight than bone, if not more. So microabrasives are just the best option here. Look how cleanly they strip off that process too. I love it. Now, this trickier stuff, this is the B72 residue from reattaching the back of the jaw. So it takes a little more time. I need to give myself a better angle to go after the crowns of the teeth and some of the alveoli. So in comes our trusty HW-322 air scribe to start building the pedestal for this specimen. We'd like to keep it on a pedestal. We're not going to do any transfer preparation unless a researcher absolutely requests it. This will be a nice display specimen, but there's still some crud on the tips of the teeth, those crowns there. So I just need better access for the air abrasives. And here it is as it rests in that original block of matrix before the whole pedestal's been carved. And I'm just going to do a magic transition here. So this is where I decided to stop. Everything's as exposed as it needs to be right now, and it is an exhibit-ready specimen. You've seen close-ups of that on social media, I'm sure. So, back to the lab.
Nice.
I'll try to pry it. I think it'll go. Yay.
Before its final
Yay.
resting place in the future, newly renovated exhibit hall at Dickinson Museum Center, our jaw's going to live in collections for a little while. It's going to room alongside one of the greatest collections of Judithian dinosaurs in the world, including this Prosaurolophus jaw packed with teeth, troodontid raptor skeletons, asdarchid pterosaurs, enantiornithines and ornithomimids, tyrannosaurs like Daspletosaurus, Gorgosaurus, and things unknown. And much more to come. We look forward to seeing you here in the future for more sneak peeks into fossil preparation and our collections.
What a quiet day it is in the lab at Dickinson Museum Center. That's where all the work in this video was done. Thank you so much for being here. It's a bit chilly. If you like what you saw, I can do a lot more. Please comment, like, subscribe, all of that. And I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.